and welcome to episode 33 of the Simply Great Relationships podcast. We're so glad you could join us today. I'm Meredith Silversmith, and with me is Marina Varan, and we're going to be talking about 6 common relationship problems that are actually normal.
I like that you did the air quote for problems because this is something that I know I see all the time. I know we've talked about it and you see it a lot. Also, where people categorize just what comes with a relationship as a problem. And sometimes when you do that, it does become a problem. But really, it's more like maybe they're not aware that this is what comes with a relationship as opposed to it being a problem.
Yeah, definitely. We see it all the time. And I think that, we've discussed in the past, if you are viewing anything as a problem, the emotional experience you have of it and the thoughts you have around it and just like everything that stems from there are going to look so different than if you didn't view it as a problem. So I think that's part of why this is so important to share is we don't want you to categorize things as a problem when they're not, because then it's going to create a problem.
Exactly.
So we've put together a really good bonus for you this week, so make sure you stay until the very end so we can tell you how to get it. What do you think, Marina? Where would you like to start with this topic?
Well, I guess where I want to start is like, how did these things, and we're going to talk about what they are, like how did these things become labeled as problems? How did they become categorized as problems?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's increasing like with time. I feel like it is. I think it's more common now, but there's sort of this idea that you're supposed to feel good in your relationship all the time. So if something happens in your relationship that causes you to not feel good, then it's a problem. And I think that's a problem. you know?
Definitely. I think along with that, it's like if it doesn't fit your idea of how a relationship should be, which I think really like ties into this belief of a relationship should be good all the time.
Yeah.
It's the shoulds.
Yeah. Yeah. That definitely goes together. And then with like social media and social pressure also, we're exposed today to other people's lives and relationships in a way that we've never been before. So not only do you have your own beliefs about how a relationship should be or how the media portrays a relationship should be, but you've got, the highlight reel that you're looking through on Facebook and Instagram of your friends and your family and how happy they are. And no, of course, you're not seeing photos of them fighting or, arguing over this or that or having, maybe one of the 6 things we're going to talk through today. But that certainly doesn't mean it's not happening. So the combination is really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard with those social media posts, especially, like there's a lot of people posting wedding photos, vacation photos, and you forget that like that's 1 second. That is not a full picture of even their day.
No. Yeah, it's literally 1 second.
Yeah.
We could all do that.
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot contributing to and propagating this belief that a relationship always has to be happy and always feel good. But, I think the parallel here is like you can love your job, but day to day your job doesn't have to feel great all the time, but like you have buffer room in there when things don't necessarily feel great at work day to day if you love your job, because overall you still love your job. But people don't necessarily extend the same courtesy to their relationship.
That's a really great analogy. I like that a lot.
So let's get into what these 6 problems that we identified are.
I wish we had everyone who was listening here right now so we could say, what do you think the first one is?
Yes. Oh, that'd be great.
Well, let's do it like this.
and have people tweet at us.
We should. You know what? But I would say this, like, before we get into it, while you're listening or watching, like, take a second and go in the comments and jot down what your guesses are. What you
Mhm.
think, we have 6 identified. I would be so curious to see what people come up with. So we'll give you a second to do that, or you can just pause us. But now we'll get into it. So what's the first one, Marina?
So the first one is disagreeing.
Mm-hmm.
People really think that disagreeing is a problem.
Mm-hmm. Not a problem.
Myth busted. Disagreeing, totally normal.
Yep.
Disagreeing, fighting, arguing, it's a part of a healthy relationship.
Yep. Not seeing eye to eye on something, having different perspectives, all normal.
Mm-hmm.
I
think this one really ties into that notion of my relationship should feel good. So when it doesn't,
mm-hmm.
that's a problem, because that's what disagreeing is. Like, it doesn't feel good.
Right.
And that's when, like, you start to question, is this a problem? It's hard to accept that as, like, the normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, in those moments, your goal should be to get as deep an understanding of each other's position as you can, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how you handle disagreement. You acknowledge that you're in disagreement. You do the work to understand where your partner is coming from and share your perspective. And then you move towards either compromise or acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Like, that's what it is. And keeping in mind, I know we've shared this statistic before, but Gottman's research shows that 69% of relationship problems are perpetual and will never be resolved. They will never, ever be resolved, and that's normal. In any relationship, you could have any relationship, and 69% of the problems, so the problems themselves will change, they will not be resolvable.
Mm-hmm. We have a really good episode on this, episode 12, how to agree to disagree. Mm-hmm. We really go into depth on this. So if this is resonating with you, definitely go and listen to that episode. I think it's important to note when this does become a problem, because you can disagree and fight, and it can be actually like a pretty healthy part of your relationship. The problem really comes in when the 4 horsemen come in, when the fights like really linger. Yeah. And when like resolvable fights don't get resolved. So 70%, 69% are perpetual, but that means there's 31% that are solvable. Yeah. And when it becomes 100% unresolved, that's when you're kind of crossing that line from normal to problem. But I would say, like, those fights and those conflicts look and feel very different than like bickering or regular fighting or regular disagreements. Like, there's a certain underlying quality of nastiness, of like punching below the belt, of intention, of like really overwhelming frustration, of flooding. These feel different. So it's really important to pay attention to how you feel in a fight. Yeah. Just because you're not feeling good, right, doesn't mean you're feeling bad. Like, there's a big space between good and bad.
And even if you are feeling bad, it becomes about, and this is sort of, I guess, a bigger conversation for probably another day, but figuring out, am I feeling bad because of my own triggers and my own baggage and my own stuff, or am I feeling bad because my partner like really did something that was hurtful and harmful? And that's hard to distinguish between sometimes.
But I think when you pay attention, you get better. It's like a skill that you really hone by utilizing it.
Yeah. There is, if you want to go back and listen to episode 4, how to get divorced, what not to do. We go into depth on the four horsemen. So if you're sort of on the fence and you're not sure if this has become a problem in your relationship or not, you could listen to that episode and see if it resonates. And if it does, then you might want to take action and start to reshape how you disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 is one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. I think this one resonates with both of us because we're both only children.
Yeah.
So sometimes doing things you prefer not to do.
Mm-hmm.
Totally normal.
Yep, not a problem.
Part of a relationship.
Mm-hmm. We're reminding ourselves right now.
Yes, this is more talking to ourselves. So, like, I understand where people can perceive this as a problem because if there's kind of this feeling of I'm giving in or I'm losing by accepting my partner's influence and doing something I don't prefer to do, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
It can look like your relationship is like me versus you, when the reality is the relationship is either we both win or we both lose. And compromise is really a we both win because it's my partner gets what they want, and I get to be supportive of them.
Yeah. And you're not,
win.
yeah. And it's part of, it's part of a relationship. You're not on your own. If you're in a relationship, there's two people that you need to consider, and you're not sacrificing your individual needs or like losing yourself. I know we hear that a lot. Like, I feel like I'm losing myself in this relationship. Compromise is not losing yourself. Compromise is not sacrificing yourself. It's considering your partner in your relationship and taking action accordingly.
We had a really great episode about this. Episode 6, and it's how to get your partner to say yes. And we made a really, really good bonus, the compromise cheat sheet, that I think, like, if this is something where you may be kind of teetering, go back and listen to the episode. A lot of really valuable information there. But in general, doing things you don't like or don't necessarily want or are not at the top of your priority list, totally normal part of a relationship. The problem comes in when you are always bending, not when you feel like,
right?
Because sometimes our feelings don't necessarily match our reality. It's when you are always bending to meet your partner's needs and do not feel like that is being reciprocated. And if there's like a rigidity and resistance, and there isn't any accepting of influence from your partner.
Yeah, so if it's completely one-sided or significantly skewed to be one-sided, and really this goes both ways, right? It's if you feel like, if you are always bending, or if you observe that your partner's always bending, because that's equally a problem, equally problematic. It's important. Accepting influence is a significant piece of relationship health, and I think that gets missed a lot. But being willing and able to accept influence from your partner and to accept influence from your partner and not exert influence, but like have some level of influence with your partner, that relationship, that piece of things is really significant, and compromise is one way that you achieve that.
I don't remember the number exactly, but males accepting influence from their female partners was one of the biggest predictors of relationship health.
I think the stats are, I think that when male partners don't accept influence from their female partners, they're 80% more likely to get divorced.
Yes.
So it's pretty powerful.
And I believe we have an episode that addresses exactly this. I do not remember the number, but we will put it in the show notes.
Yeah. The title is something like that with the stats.
Yes.
But definitely worth listening to if this resonates.
Yeah.
What about the third one? I think this is another one that comes up quite often, going through a sex drought.
Yep. Going through a sex drought, that really tends to be like one that pushes a lot of uh, people's like panic button.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the reality is, like, sex tends to be one of the first things to get put on the back burner during times of stress for a lot of couples.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay as long as it's being talked about and it's short-lived.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're going through a short drought, we're not moving to the desert,
Mm-hmm.
right?
How would
We're
you draw that line?
So I think it really depends on what a couple's sex life looks like before.
Mm-hmm.
So what their regular and normal is. So if regular and normal is maybe once a week,
Mm-hmm.
they have a date night and they have sex, and this is a pattern for them that's really consistent for the most part. And then maybe they have a drought for a month,
Mm-hmm.
5 weeks, 6 weeks, because they're moving, or because someone's starting a new job, or because a family member passed away, or because there's some sort of external circumstance that's really anxiety provoking, or your partner just got a medical diagnosis, or they're on a new medication, or,
Mm-hmm.
like, there's some sort of adjustment period. I think that is fine as long
Mm-hmm.
as that's being noted, acknowledged, and talked about openly.
Okay. So the goal there should be to notice it, right? Identify that it's happening, talk about it. So it's a shared experience between your partner and you, and then
Mhm.
to make a plan for
Yeah.
reinstating.
Yeah, and the plan is super simple. Schedule sex.
Mm-hmm.
When things get hectic, you put things on a schedule to manage them. Make sex no different.
Mm-hmm. And we did have an episode a while back, episode 10, Bringing Sexy Back, that details sort of that process for talking through it and coming up with a schedule. So you could definitely check that out. Um, when would you feel like this sex drought transitions into a problem?
So I would say there are a couple of streams of how it can transition. First of all, like, if the stressor is gone, but the drought continues,
Okay.
that's one problem. Like, say the stressor was temporary, like a move,
Mm-hmm.
or new high stress position. You went through the transition, but the change in your sex life feels a little more permanent.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem. Um, the just time, like, if it's kind of pushing out to an outer limit, and like it's not being brought up, or there are impasses to sticking to the schedule,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a problem. Um, if your partner starts withholding sex as kind of a power manipulation tactic,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they haven't gotten as much attention from you, and they kind of try to bait you but then withhold,
Mm-hmm.
like, or you're doing that to them, because
Mm-hmm.
sex is very powerful currency in a relationship. um, that's a problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes
So,
sense.
so any of these, and like, not only exclusive to this, but any of these would be a problem.
Okay. Number 4, feeling sad or angry because of something your partner did.
Yep.
Normal.
Very, very normal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, your partner, much like yourself, is a flawed human being.
What?
All of us, flawed human beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we're not these like super mindful Buddhas sitting on top of a mountain meditating all day and being super attuned and considerate of each other's feelings and speaking from a loving, open heart all the time. Like we live in the
Mm-hmm.
real world, and sometimes our partners do things that make us angry or piss us off or hurt our feelings. Um, and they're not mind readers.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're not going to anticipate exactly how you would think about something or exactly how something would make you feel, um, which I think people often want. They want to feel like their partner knows them. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. If you knew me, then you would
Mm-hmm.
know that I
Yeah.
would feel XYZ. And
Well,
I'm
he should
constantly
just
saying,
know.
yeah, and I'm constantly saying, like, no. That it doesn't work that way. It might feel that way, but that doesn't mean that's really what happened. So you have to
Mhm.
keep in mind that just because you feel sad or angry because of something your partner said or did does not mean they don't love you. It does not mean that they did something wrong necessarily. It doesn't mean that your relationship is in jeopardy. Like, it's just something that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like 90% of the time when something like this happens, it's just like a mindless action,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's like no malintention
Yeah.
behind it. There's no like preemptiveness. There's no nothing other than like somebody just wasn't thinking. And this is where it's really, really important to do one of my favorite Gottman things, which
Mm-hmm.
is give benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is really like the biggest difference between interpreting an action, like a mindless action, as a problem, and
Yeah.
interpreting a mindless action as a mindless action is
Mm-hmm.
giving benefit of the doubt that your partner was a flawed human being in that second and
Mm-hmm.
you know didn't consider the full picture and just did something that upset you without any intention.
Mm-hmm. And, your job in that moment, right? Your responsibility is to manage your emotions, right? So
Hmm.
just because your partner did something and then you felt angry or sad does not mean you get to unleash those emotions on your partner.
Hmm.
It's your responsibility to manage your emotions and then to constructively communicate your feelings and needs to your partner. And there's
Hmm.
a great way to do this. Back in episode 1, we did communication that actually works. There's a bonus in there. The episode, we go into great detail on how to constructively communicate what you need and how you feel. So, like, that's
Hmm.
your role in this.
Hmm.
There are certainly scenarios where this does cross over into a problem. Um,
Hmm.
as always, four horsemen, right? We know that when the four horsemen get involved, that's a problem. Um, if if it were done intentionally, like you said, Marina, 90% of the time it wasn't, but maybe there are a few times when it is. And you can't base this on assumption.
Hmm.
It can't be, it feels like it was done intentionally. You need to actually verify. And in my experience, and I'm curious what you're going to say, when I have couples check on this, like, did you intend that? If they did, they'll tell you.
Yeah, people are generally
Yeah.
very like upfront with like, yes, that was my intention to make you feel that way when it is intentional.
Yeah.
And it feels very different and looks very different when it's
Mm-hmm.
intentional than when it's just like a little absent-minded.
You tend to see the four horsemen.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty solid sign. And I would say the four horsemen does not automatically mean it was intentional.
Hmm.
But I would say if it was intentional, the four horsemen would probably be involved.
Hmm. Number 5,
Mm.
wanting to spend some time on your own or with friends and family.
Mm-hmm. This is another big one that comes up.
Hmm.
And I mean, look, while your partner should be is and should be your primary connection, it's also okay and normal and healthy to have other connections.
Hmm. And it's important to find that balance, allocating time to your relationship and then allocating time to friends, family, gym activities, whatever it is that you also want in your life. You can't just rely on your partner to be your only contact, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something called saturation effect, which is when partners spend too much time together and it actually has a negative impact on their relationship. Like there's a lot to having a little time apart and getting a little chance to miss each other and getting that feeling of like wanting to connect again. It's like a little battery recharge.
Yeah. And I would say, when I find myself talking to couples a lot about this, that you can't depend on your partner to fill up your cup. Like when you get depleted, I feel like I know I will do this at times when I'm not being like mindful about things. You don't feel good, you feel stressed, you feel tired, you feel whatever. And instead of taking responsibility for that and saying, what could I do to make me feel better? What self-care could I do? Maybe it's going for a walk or watching a favorite show or getting a cup of coffee that you really would enjoy and savor. You like turn to your partner almost like, okay, entertain me. Like, okay, make me feel better. Do so, be happy and be funny and do something that's going to impact me in a positive way. And that's not really fair.
I'm not the only one.
You can't do that. It's not their job. So, I think that this falls into that area of filling up your own cup, doing things that bring you joy and recharge your batteries so that you can be a good partner.
I think so. Let's identify where we would kind of cross the line into a problem. The problem with this is when other relationships get prioritized over your own relationship consistently.
Yeah.
And there's a feeling of being unloved, unwanted, insignificant, or there is this like feeling of spending time with other people to escape or avoid your relationship.
Right.
And again, that feels very different than like, you have a best friend and you have a brunch date once a month that you've had forever and wanting to spend time like that.
Yeah, very different. And, if you find you and your partner struggling with this balance, I would encourage you to go back to episode 14, how to make time for each other when there is no time, because that will really walk you through like divvying it up and setting priorities and things like that.
And I think the good thing to touch on with that is, at least I tend to see this become a lot more of a problem with busier couples who do have like less time together.
Agreed.
Or couples that work like opposite shifts who have less time together. So it's really like a time management,
time and priority. That's very true.
Number 6.
The last one.
So number 6 is butting heads on major life decisions. Totally normal.
Yep.
Life decisions, big things. To expect to just be like, let's buy a new house, and your partner being like, yes, and this should be our budget and this is where it should be, and you being like, great, let's go do it. Not realistic at all.
No, because these, as you said, these are big things, and often they're around some sort of transition. And it's super normal for emotions to get really heightened during times of transition because you've got a lot of uncertainty, you've got change, and you're feeling like escalated and an escalated emotional experience. When we get to that state, it like physiologically becomes harder to communicate, harder to make constructive decisions, and harder to be flexible. And the more heightened you get, the harder those things become. So if you two stay engaged in this conversation, you are going to butt heads. So you need to manage your emotions first and then sit down to have a constructive conversation.
Exactly. And the goal here is really understanding,
Mm-hmm.
right? The goal here is not to bring your partner to your side,
Right.
which goes back to point number one, which is like, it's okay to fight and disagree. Like,
Yeah.
the a lot of fights and disagreements happen because our goal is to bring our partner to our side, not to get to understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, the same, like major life decisions. The goal is not to say your view of this should be exactly the same as mine. The goal should be, let me be vulnerable and share as much of my view, and you be vulnerable with me and share as much of your view, and let's try to co-create something that meets both of our needs as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And, don't expect to naturally agree. Like Marina said before, it's very, very unlikely that you're just going to wake up on the same page with this. If you need help getting to the same page, go back to episode 15, how to get your partner to support your life's dreams, because that really walks you through this process of being able to listen with the intent to understand and with the intent to support, not to persuade.
Mm-hmm.
But again, as with all five of the previous five, there could become a time where this does cross over into a problem. And again, four horsemen coming out, that's a pretty common theme here. If you see the four horsemen, it is a problem. If there's no discussion, if there's no compromise, if you're feeling unheard or like your opinion doesn't matter, those are problems. So go back to episode 15, try that process. And if you're still stuck, you might want to do something different.
Mm-hmm. And the nice thing is, like, there are ways to really work through this. Like, it's just about making a little shift. Like, again, little effort, big, big reward.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, as we always say, if you don't feel like you can resolve it on your own, we're happy to help. The quickest way to a simply great relationship is working with us. So you could always send us an email at info@simplygreatrelationships.com or shoot us a text at 914-440-4814. We'd love to chat with you and, certainly be of assistance. You could also go on our website, simplygreatrelationships.com, and submit a request there.
Definitely. And we'd love to hear from you. Also, we don't want you to just listen. We want you to listen and to integrate this into your relationship, especially because this is something basically everybody goes through.
Yeah.
We've put together a really, really great bonus. It's Good to Be Normal relationship pack, which combines all the bonuses that we talked about today.
Yeah.
And you can get it at simplygreatrelationships.com/033.
So if any of these applied to you, definitely download that, because it's going to have for each of the 6 a bonus that matches. So it's a good one.
Yeah, I like it. I feel like it's a great resource. Like, print it out, put it in a drawer in your bedroom, whip it out whenever one of these comes out.
Yeah.
So let's talk takeaways.
Takeaways. My biggest takeaway, I think it's just a refresher. I always benefit from the refresher of, you are responsible for recharging your own batteries, and you really shouldn't be looking to your partner to like hop to it and make you feel good.
So funny, because that is exactly my takeaway. I'm like, I love when you do the like fill up your own cup analogy. Like, I always think about that. And I think it's something that like is a process for me. And like, I always have to think about it. So like, having that refresher today is great. But just like realizing that things that don't feel good are a part of normal.
Yeah.
Is like a big takeaway, like a big reminder. Like, a relationship does not feel good 24/7.
Right.
That doesn't mean it feels bad 24/7.
Yeah. That's good. I love when we're on the same page. So that's all for today, guys. We hope you take these tips and start using them right away. We'd love for you to continue the conversation with us in our Facebook group, where we'll hook you up with tips, tricks, and live streams exclusively for our members. You also get early access to the episode each week, so that's kind of cool too. You can find the group at facebook.com/groups/simplygreatrelationships, or click the link on our website, simplygreatrelationships.com. We hope to see you there. And until next time, we'll see ya. Bye.
Bye.